Welcome, everyone, to the 8th episode of season 2 of our CSA Fireside. And I think every episode I get more and more excited. So today we're in Sri Lanka and we're joined by some amazing young people. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, starting with my guy, Savin.
So hello everyone. My name is Savina Singh. I'm from Sri Lanka. I'm from the down south of Sri Lanka. Actually, I'm from Goa. It's a beautiful country and a beautiful town as well. It's quite European because with the colonial history. I am undergrad at the moment in CINEC campus. I'm studying BA in English, and I'm also interested in international relations, psychology, and I work as a digital marketer as well. So, and I'm very ardent about creating a collection of students or a collective of students in Sri Lanka, both in the government universities and in private universities, to create sort of we are the future. And as the saying goes, future is now. So we should start working and we should be building towards a future where everyone is cooperating and working collaboratively. Otherwise, it would be a very difficult future to face towards. So that's why I'm here. And thank you, Benjamin, for actually recruiting me for today's
Of
session and
course,
also for future work as well. Yeah.
believe me, you can tell a lot about energy. You have a good vibe. So
Thank you. Thank you.
thanks. All right, Cicely.
Hi, my name is Tisali De Silva. I did my bachelor's and master's both in economics and pretty much worked into the economic research field in Sri Lanka. And currently, I am working as assistant lecturer at the Department of Economics at University of Colombo. So I think I was invited because the session today is basically about education, higher education, and yeah, I'll try to give some inputs from my side. Yeah.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. So when Savin sent me the persons who are coming on, I said, wow, this is a high level panel. I feel nice. All right, Shanti.
Hello, thank you so much again, Benjamin, for having us. I will start off by saying Ayubowan to those who are joining in from across the world. That's how we say hello, and we wish you a long life in the way we say hello here in Sri Lanka. So, to tell you a little bit about myself, everyone calls me Chira, so Benjamin, feel free to call me Chira as well if it's easier to pronounce rather than my very long name. And my interest area is in actually development justice and development governance, with a specific focus on rethinking development from a global south perspective. And currently, I serve as a lecturer in law at Horizon Campus, which is one of the non-state universities in Sri Lanka. So I feel like the panel is quite diverse that way because you'll be able to represent both sides of the conversation. And I lecture the LLM attached to the University of London International Programs and the Birmingham City University LLM in International Human Rights. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for having us. Really looking forward to the conversation.
So Shira, are you also called to the bar in Sri Lanka?
Yes, yes. I'm
Oh,
one of those
nice.
attorneys.
Lawyer here too. Whoa, whoa.
Yay. So,
Okay.
Benjamin, are you practicing now?
I'm practicing. I'm actually at work. So I came in
Oh,
early so that I
okay.
wouldn't have to drive from home. So yeah. All right. So today we are discussing the future of Sri Lanka, reforming higher education to rise above economic crisis and political turmoil. We're going to journey through this discussion by taking it in stages, looking at the historical context, looking at the present day problem, and discussing how higher education needs to be reformed to contribute to helping the country move on from the present crisis it's facing. But before we get into the heavy stuff, tell us about Sri Lanka. I think Savin is going to take that one on. And I want to hear your personal experience of growing up in this island paradise.
Yeah. So that's a huge task actually. I'll start by saying Aiboan as well. So that is how we greet each other. It's pretty universal in terms of Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is a very ethnic, it's filled with many ethnicities, filled with many religions, filled with many people. So, but everyone says Aiboan because it's sort of universal in a way. And I think you might know this. There's a word called Ayo, which was added to the Oxford Dictionary and Cambridge Dictionary as well, which is from Sri Lanka, which means like "oh God," something like that. So maybe perhaps one day Aiboan will be also added to the dictionaries as well, because it's a very let's say democratic and diplomatic way of greeting someone. It's long life for you, and we hold our hands together to do that. Yeah. So Sri Lanka is a beautiful country. It's a very small country, but with a very, very vast and huge history. And the most important thing is that history was written down over 2000 years ago. We have a written history that's very rare among modern countries, actually. So due to this, we have a lot of pride in our historical events, historical achievements that we had all those years, and we are very proud of history. And history is one of the subjects, one of the compulsory subjects you should follow in our education system as well. And if we move on from there, if we talk about the population, we have about 21 million, 22, 21 million people in Sri Lanka. And there are mainly 4 ethnic groups, which is Sinhalese, the Tamils, the Muslims, and we have Christians and Catholics as well. So Sinhalese is the majority, and we speak Sinhala. It's a beautiful language. We have very curvy letters. It's very difficult to write these letters. It's easier than Chinese letters, but Mandarin letters, but it's still difficult. And we also have the Tamil people, the Tamil ethnicity. The Tamil people are mostly Hindu people, and most of them have their roots in Tamil Nadu, but there is also roots that run here in Sri Lanka as well. So they speak Tamil, a Dravidian language. It's one of the most ancient languages in the world, and it's also once again a very beautiful language which has a rich literature. And also we have Muslim community here in Sri Lanka, and also Christian and Catholics. These 2 groups also predate in certain historians, in the view of certain historians, they predate colonialism, and that's a very interesting thing for another time to talk about. So those are the main people that are living in Sri Lanka at the moment. Of course, there are immigrants as well, and there are a lot of foreigners coming into Sri Lanka who stays, and some leave, some come as tourists, but when some falls in love with this country, and they establish themselves here. One of the famous foreigners who lived here was Arthur C. Clarke, the great scientist, the great science fiction writer. He lived in Colombo. Yeah. So that's kind of like a snapshot of a history, but there's a lot of history to dig into if we talk about the kingdoms that we had. Few of the kingdoms we had was Anuradhapura, Polonnaru, and Kandy. We have a city called Kandy. Not, there are sweet people there all around the country, actually. So that's most about it.
Tell
and
us
we have
briefly what it was like.
Yeah.
Growing up there.
Growing up in Sri Lanka.
What has it been like growing up?
Yes. Yeah, it's like actually it's like a holiday in some sort of, in some way it's been like a holiday. I grew up in a village down south of Sri Lanka called Imaduwa. We although we are connected to urban cities and we are connected to all the infrastructures, we are still disconnected from all the hustle and the bustle from the cities and the towns. So it's a very Hope I am clear. I'm audible, right? Yeah, I think there's a sort of a lag.
I think it might be my internet that's a little bit unstable.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah. So as I was telling, I think the most important part of growing up in Sri Lanka is you are exposed to a lot of ideas and you have access to a lot of people, because you have Tamil people living here, Muslim people, Christian people, and with the cultures, the languages, and also most importantly, the food. The food is great here because we can get any type of food here in Sri Lanka because we have a rich culture of people and a rich history and so many different ways of people exchanging their, people interacting. So that's one of them. And also, I think one of the most important things where Sri Lankan people take it for granted, we have free education and we also have free healthcare. So that is very rare in ex-colonial countries and also South Asian countries actually. So we should be very thankful for that, and we should definitely try to protect these resources for future generations as well. So I think it's pretty easy to live in Sri Lanka if you are a Sri Lankan, I might say. But I actually I wouldn't have hope for a better place to live in and better place to grow up and to have my childhood here is a very important thing because you're very free actually. When you grow up, you find certain loopholes in the country, the political system, the culture, the education system, but until then it's very free and it's very yeah, it's like a holiday. That's how I would like to put it. Yeah,
it's like a holiday. I love that. Tell us now a little bit about the historical context. I mean, we're not going to go into a whole lecture.
Yeah.
Because 2,000 years of written history, I'm not sure when would end, but give us the highlights. So Sri Lanka was granted independence in 1948 and became a republic in 1972. Share with us the political history of Sri Lanka since independence, and then share with us the economic highlights since independence.
Yeah, so basically we got independence in 1948 by the British, and from there on we were named as a Commonwealth country. That's why we are here. And also we became a republic in 1972, and open economy was also introduced during that time. I think Tisali will talk about the economic side of our country in a few moments. So I would say one of the turning points in the country, and both politically, culturally, socially, and economically, is the year 1956. In this year, the government made Sinhala language the official language of the country. Remember, we are living in a multi-ethnic, multicultural society. So by making the majority language as the official language of Sri Lanka, there occurred a certain rift between the cultures, the ethnicities, because even though we were the majority, there was a considerable amount of minority people who couldn't do anything, who couldn't even read during that back in the day they had telegrams, right? They couldn't even read a telegram at that time. For example, Tamil people would have to go like 40, 30, 50 kilometers to read a telegram because they have to go to a nearby temple where monks were, and they knew the languages. So that's how this ethnic conflict, in my opinion, and also many of Sri Lankan people agree and Sri Lankan scholars agree, this started because language is the most unique thing of a human, and also as social beings, humans need to have language and need to have the ability to communicate with one another. Otherwise, how are we going to live? Because we are social animals, and apart from that, as Aristotle said, we are political animals. How do we do politics? How do we control ourselves and control each other and manage each other without knowing the language? So that's one of the major turning points in the Sri Lankan history, actually, 1956. Then from there on, politicians used this Sinhala only act, which was what it was called, to gain a leverage in a political way. They use it as a political tool to get the votes and to get the goodwill of the majority of people. The people didn't know anything about politics at the time, because we were coming fresh off colonialism. Still the politicians during that time was the aristocrats. Normal people weren't allowed to do, not weren't allowed, but they had no interest in doing politics because they didn't know. But after the great CWW Kannangara, one of the education ministers of Sri Lanka, introduced free education to the country, and from there on, people got much more educated, and as of now, we have the highest literacy rate in South Asia. I think it's somewhere between 92% or something like that, 92.2% or something like that, and one of the highest literacy rate in Asia and the entire world as well. So it worked out pretty good, but still we are not literate about the political administration, the economical strategies that we need to create a far better country, because Sri Lanka deserves much more. Sri Lanka has taken care of us all without even a single earthquake, because we are not situated in a naturally assailant place where earthquakes take place, and we don't have that much of natural disasters. We had the tsunami, of course, in 2004. That was a great disaster, but we are still lucky because we don't have volcanoes or earthquakes, or we are saved from nature. They have protected us, our country, our location, our strategic location, which has protected and also has made us fall into trouble, because that is why the Europeans came here, due to the strategic location of Sri Lanka. It is situated right below India. We call Sri Lanka the pearl of India. It's like a pearl. India is the earlobe, and we are the pearl. So the strategic location helped the Europeans and the colonizers to control India far easily by setting up camp here in Sri Lanka. So when there was a war in India, troops were here in Sri Lanka, and we sent the Europeans send people there. That's how we were used. And there's an amazing natural port in Jaffna, the tip of the country. There's a natural port which you can use to, I think in modern terms, you can use to cover up. You can use that port to have the biggest air carrier. The biggest war craft, the war boat that you have. The US have, you can use it there. Still, there are Westerners who are interested in this strategic location. So that's another point to remember, because we'll talk about it in few moments, because there's a certain economic war going on between China and the USA, and also India has joined in now. So all three of these countries are interested in Sri Lanka's strategic location, and we are friends with all, because we have this non-alignment movement going on. So we are friends with all, which in a way means you're friends with no one. So lot of things to talk about. So that is the basic history of Sri Lanka. I would like to say that the history of Sri Lanka is an ongoing one rather than a finished history, because everything that you will experience in Sri Lanka in terms of economic, politics, or social or cultural, even interpersonal or even interpersonal. We are still living in the history and it's still continuing to flow, and we are still going on. We are still following history. We haven't catched up yet. We haven't caught up. So, that's a thing to remember about Sri Lanka when you think in the perspective of a Sri Lankan or in the perspective of Sri Lanka. Yeah. So I hope I answered your question. I might have gone off road. Sorry for that.
You have. But as an aside, I like to say if poetry were an official language, I'd say you speak poetry. Yeah, the way you coin things, it's flavorful. One sub question though, and you could just answer in one sentence before I go to Sicily. What's the main commodity? What's the main good or service in Sri Lanka, or the top industries?
Yeah, so we export tea. We are, I think, the world fourth largest tea exporter, and we are the world largest cinnamon exporter. Cinnamon actually was found in Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Not a lot of people know that. Actually, even Sri Lankans doesn't know that. I think. So cinnamon and tea, sure, and then the modern. If we come to the modern era, textile industry.
Okay.
That's where we create a lot of garments for world renowned brands like Victoria's Secret, Tommy Hilfiger.
I have a few. I have a few. I've seen the label. Yeah.
So that's where our main foreign income comes from. But now we are thinking of shifting towards a service economy and then towards tourism as well. But those were the main things that made Sri Lankans who we are and gave us the money. Yeah.
Okay, so we have I think Savin has helped us with a good footing of the history. And Thicely, I want to ask you to take us through the present day problem, starting with the poverty rate that has doubled from 2020, that doubled in 2021 from 13% to 25% according to the World Bank. What has been happening in Sri Lanka's politics and economy since the last 3 to 4 years?
First of all, I must apologize for any background noise coming here, because even though we are living in a holiday, I am living next to a road. There could be noises coming from vehicles. So I'll give a small introduction about the economic history, just running through. So since independence in 1948, from 1948, the year Savin mentioned, 1956, the politics was same as the colonial ruling. So colonial rulers have given us some sort of a decent economy, because the plantation industry was very blooming, and our economic standards were quite higher than most of the other Asian countries by then. So after 1956, with the political change, there was a sort of a small closing of the economy, and the peak was from 1970 to 77, where complete import substitution industrialization was was happening in Sri Lanka, and that was a perfect controlled economy by the state. So public enterprises and government intervention in all sort of economic and very much restrictions over imports were there. So in 1977 is where, so this 70 to 77 period was quite hard for people, and the next government immediately carried out policies to liberalize the economy in 1977. So we had a quite open economy since 1977, until very recently the government had carried out some trade restrictions since 2019. it is the year where you were talking about 3-4 years from now. So these restrictions were basically happened because there was a highly controlled fiscal policy, like both fixed interest rates and fixed exchange rates were there. So the monetary, the fluctuations in the monetary system was held by the government. So these policies were, there is this economic theory called modern monetary theory or something, which can which gives opportunity for certain currencies to improve, but actually this modern monetary theory didn't work for Sri Lanka. And also the reason why there were some tax reductions, and also COVID-19 and the external factors came in, where there was a huge failure in the economic system. So that the reason to keep the fixed exchange rate, government had to release all the foreign reserves they had within the central bank. And on the other hand, to Savin said that we have free education, free health, and our government expenditure is quite high normally. But to finance the government expenditure, the direct taxes are very low in Sri Lanka, and we have very high, our base of the tax is the indirect taxes coming from goods and services. So when the inflation, basically when during the COVID time, and also because the reserves were going out, government had to print money to finance mainly the government finances. So there was a huge tax reduction in 2019. And so tax reduction was focused in a way the government would say that they wanted some expansion in economy, more investors to come in and all. But since 2019, there was COVID came in, and a lot of other external issues came in, so that there was no much of increasing economic activities. So anyway, when there's no tax income and there's no exports, Sri Lanka had to print money. So basically printing money, and inflation is having very bad impact. So high level of money printing went for high level of inflation. So that's why when the inflation is very high, poverty levels goes up. So people cannot afford the levels. But I must say, like, there were some positives in 2023, because if we see 2022, it was a complete failure of the state. And in March, somewhere in March 2022, Sri Lanka defaulted the whole debt, because I actually forgot to mention the debt crisis. Sri Lanka has, I don't really remember the numbers, but we have more than 100% of government GDP debt. Debt to GDP ratio is more than 100%. So these foreign loans, we really don't have enough foreign reserves to pay up our loans. So that's why Sri Lanka was defaulted. And right now, since we're not paying off the loans for the bilateral lenders, we are going on with certain, so the IMF plan has given us some support. So only we are paying, as far as I know, only the multilateral loans we are paying, and there are certain conditions for the bilateral loans and so on. But some improvements in terms of inflation we can see, because the new central bank governor has given some strict the fluctuation in interest rates and all. So yeah, this is what is currently happening. And if you want any further information, you can just ask any questions. Yeah.
I think that summary helps
Yeah,
us
that's a very
understand.
summary.
It was widely published in international news, and you said just now that in 2022 the nation became a failed state. Something I'd like to hear Shura's perspective on. Are persons calling it a failed state? Well, I think I now have the answer to the question, but I still want to ask it. Is it politically motivated to call it that, or you would agree that this is supported by unbiased economic reporting?
Sure. So actually, in my perspective, Benjamin, I think that terms like pariah state, failed state, etc., is necessarily motivated by the international political economy and power imbalances between the global north and the global south. Like, unfortunately, we can't deny that because there's quite a bit of politics behind it. However, there are systemic issues in countries like Sri Lanka, which actually came out of a history of colonialism that
Yes.
contribute to the fact that our systems are just not functional. And one of the key reasons why that is because, in my personal opinion, I would love to hear what Tisi, Savin, and even Benjamin, you think personally from your perspective. One of the biggest reasons is that the systems are not our own. It's just a copy paste and a random collection of characteristics from our colonial influences and what's so-called international best practices. Like if I was to take an example from the legal field, Sri Lanka's commercial law is an entire copy paste of the UK commercial law. So you don't have actual systems that support the endemic development requirements of the country. So if the systems are working, unfortunately, development doesn't work, which I think is why development globally is failing because we're not focused on systems. But the terminology of failed and pariah is politically motivated, yet our systems aren't as functional and reliable and accountable as we would like it to be.
I'm telling you, and I'm just giving you the honest perspective of somebody who was outside of the country. I read the news. It just looked like absolute chaos because all they kept showing was videos of people storming the presidential palace and going in the pool. The way how it seemed was that there was nobody decent left in Sri Lanka. That's how they represented it. And I absolutely detest that. It's something they do to third states. They make us seem like we're not people. They've done it to my country. They continue to do it to several other countries. And I'm not sure exactly how we can reject it. I think this is our sort in by us having our own conversations that we create our own platforms and we control the narrative. That's probably how we can fight back. Yes. I'm not sure how many views this will get, but even if it's 100 or 1,000 or whatever, those people will know that there's a Shira, there's a Savin and Thisali and thousands and millions of other Sri Lankans that love Sri Lanka. I don't think the place is just gone to the dogs. Please, some of these news reporters, they're awful. Moving on. So, but I would like to hear what you thought though, about how it all unfolded. That at climax, who would like to share their view on that? What was happening in your mind when it was happening in 2022?
Maybe I'll go. Yeah. So yeah, during that time, actually, I just started my degree, and it was called a people's struggle because in Sri Lanka, in Sinhala language, struggle has two meanings. So, Aragalaya is the term that we use for struggle and also for revolution. So, it is the same word that we use for people suffering and also people, doing a revolution and getting out of that suffering. So, I find that very poetic in a way and very ironical in a way as well. So, that's what it is called, people's struggle. And when this first started, I think it was people were in a lot of pressure because after Corona, people were in COVID-19 era, people were in lockdowns. They see their loved ones for, God knows, maybe some for a whole year, and they didn't have the freedom of movement. In Sri Lanka, we had a 30-year war. Even during that time, people used to travel all around the island. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, people couldn't go out of their homes, their houses, so they were packed in. And when people cannot move freely, one of the major things that they lose is the access for information, access for correct, truthful, and informative information, I would say. So due to that, there was this pressure cooker of pressure boiling up. It was tight. It was even people who weren't political in their day-to-day lives became political, and they wanted to do something about this, because people fear the things that they don't understand. And during the COVID era, people didn't understand what this was, because no one of us in the entire world went through this. So on top of that, as Tisali mentioned, our taxes went up because we were losing money, actually. And then there was an electricity breakdown, actually. So people were only given electricity for 1 hour per day or 2 hours per day in certain cases, because they didn't have the money, the coal, to provide people with electricity. So that was the major thing that ironically fueled the struggle, the uprise of people, because that's the only thing that keep modern humans entertained and also engaged. Because if there's no electricity, for people who are used to electricity for their life, during their lifetime, when to suddenly take it away from them, and without their own fault, it's not like we didn't pay our electricity bills. We did that. But even though we did that, we were getting electricity bills to pay as well. But our electricity, they couldn't give it. They didn't have it. So from there on, it was sparked, and people went on. And as you said, the Western media portrayed it as a failed state. So for a state to be failed, the government of the country should be no more. It shouldn't be there. There should be no government for a failed state to truly be a failed state. But we didn't have a government only for few days. Then we had a government, and certain people took the power, and they started working for their own good or for our good. But we weren't anarchists. It was not like the French Revolution, where everyone was getting beheaded. We didn't behead anyone.
I didn't have this question in the script, but Thistely or Shira, I'd like to hear your perspective on this, or both of you. Do you think there are foreign interests who want to paint Sri Lanka as a failed state to their own advantage? They want to swoop in to take your resources or get cheap labor, whatever their interest is in Sri Lanka. Is it that this is supposed to benefit some external power? Ladies.
Rishi, would you like to start? Okay, do you want me to go ahead, writer? So I think in a way it's good that this is going after me, because I feel like she might be able to give a more diplomatic and balanced stance than me. But what I would say is that being in the forefront of the struggle and actually working with the protesters, mainly in the form of capacity building at Gota Gogama, which was the headquarters of the civic struggle, there were a couple of salient observations that one could make on the ground, which suggests that the funding coming into the Gota Gogama as well as the civic struggle wasn't only people's funding. Originally, it was people's funding, it was pretty apparent that, and this could be a very controversial opinion from my end, but this is something I publicly acknowledge, because when the civic struggle actually started in pockets where people were, it was really a struggle of the middle class for the first time in Sri Lankan history expressing their regret for the way that systems worked in Sri Lanka. But and you could see it was a middle class struggle, because the moment President Wickremesinghe came in and was able to provide the electricity, was able to provide the petrol, the gas, etc., the struggle completely lost interest, as in lost support from the middle class itself. So what you can actually see is, like, moving away from that segue that I made, at the start of it was the middle class actually expressing their frustration. And you could see that it was a people's right struggle, because it wasn't completely organized to an extent that it looked like there was institutional and foreign involvement. But towards the middle of the struggle, when they started setting up tents at Kota Gogama, when there was so much food funding coming in, and when we weren't allowed to ask questions like, where did you get the funding to set up this tent? How are you perhaps giving all 3 meals to like around good 1,000 to 1,500 protesters every day? And when there was a lack of transparency, you know that there was some sort of institutional involvement, but unfortunately, I don't have the facts and the data to prove to you what the sources are. So it could be me being a bit of a, yeah, exactly, suspicion, and me having my own controversies and these sort of like tinfoil theories. But when you were on the ground, you could sense that the protest had been taken up by large institutional forces. And we all know that Sri Lanka, as well as South Asia, or the global South in general, is strategically important for economic, political, and various other purposes. So we can't deny the strategic importance of the country that we're in. Yes, but unfortunately, I don't have the facts to say this is the nature of the involvement, which was foreign.
Yeah. Cicely, what's your view?
Well, actually, I don't think I'm a very international level person to answer that. Besides, I was completely out of the country during the whole year. So as Shira said, the struggle was started anyway with the issues arise for people. So anyway, the economic crisis, I must say that was internal issues were there more, like our macroeconomic policies were not stable. That was the basic reason for everything. Maybe there were like, that even right now, there are a lot of investment projects from foreign countries happening in Sri Lanka. And so maybe some influence was there for Sri Lanka even now from the power ends, like from other economic powers. But more or less about the what we call the Aragaleo, the revolution, I also agree with Shira that it was started very much due to all the issues. And the other thing is it was dragging out a lot. And by the time President Wickremesinghe was appointed and giving out everything which was which people wanted, the interest for that left off. So hard to say whether there were any external influence over the Aragalaya, but more or less, in my opinion, basically, the economic crisis was built within Sri Lanka. So it was for our own policies. Yeah.
All right, so we're going into the final segment of our discussion on higher education and its role in responding to the situation. Describe the state of higher education in Sri Lanka. I think I'd like to hear Shira start off with this. So we already know that it's free. So I think I'll skip that question. But what I'd like to know, are the program offerings limited? Can you generally study what you want to study in Sri Lanka, or do students have to typically go abroad to pursue the fields of study they're interested in?
Sure, absolutely. Again, thank you, Benjamin, for the opportunity. But I just wanted to add one thing before I move directly into talking about program access. Well, that is because Sri Lanka does have, on the surface, based on the basic statistical indicators of free education system, especially at a school level. Like if you take a look at Sri Lanka's performance under SDG 4, which is quality education, Sri Lanka has a 98.8 literacy rate. We have 99.46 enrollment rate in schools. So in terms of the base indicators, Sri Lanka is doing well school performance-wise in comparison to South Asia. Completely agreed. However, if you really move the analysis and the focus point to higher education, tertiary education, Sri Lanka is actually not doing very well. And why that is because the Asian Development Bank last year released a report which shows that, and this was entirely based on survey data that's collected from the country itself, Sri Lanka actually only has a university enrollment rate of 18.9%. So that is actually relatively low in comparison to other middle income countries, because generally, on average, if you take middle income countries, they at least have a 50.8% university enrollment. So in terms of higher education, in terms of enrollment, and in terms of access to higher education, I don't think the country is doing as well as we should. And I think one reason why that is because of this systemic sort of conflict between state versus non-state education. I think Savin already referred to that. We have an entire politicized movement called the Inter-University Student Federation, and this is whom I'm very critical of openly, who actually believe that free education means that it should only be state provided. They don't focus on the access part of education, which is the fact that if you can access paid education, you should be given the right to access paid education. So you have systemic issues like that as well, which is preventing free access. And another aspect is that we don't have disaggregated data in terms of education reporting. So, for example, we know that, let's say, Sri Lanka has 98% or sorry, 99% enrollment rate in primary education, but we don't have disaggregated data in terms of how many indigenous young people are enrolled, how many women in a particular district are enrolled in primary education, and how many actually continue. So it's base indicators that don't give us like the full picture. And that I think is an issue with SDG reporting in general. You have these base indicators that tell you that certain systems are working, but when you look at it deeply, there are more systemic issues that kind of are revealed from the facts of it. And like moving on to the question that you asked, which is regards to program of offerings. So this I think is a unique question because Sri Lanka is at a stage where, because of the parallel operation of state as well as non-state universities, we have a diversification of the courses offered. It isn't really the case where you have only the most popular and the most basic of courses like the sciences, the STEM subjects, and law, etc., that is being offered. And what we see is that even state universities are the 17 universities that are funded by the government. They are also moving towards diversification of their courses. Like to give a simple example, University of Moratuwa was, who is like, or not who was, rather the University of Moratuwa, which is known for having Sri Lanka's best engineering degree, also diversified and went into fashion designing, went into engineering and big data. So you actually have courses diversifying now simply because of the demand, the knowledge demand of the international employment markets, as well as the youth in general who are far more motivated towards diversifying their specialties. But there is this one thing though, even though the courses are theoretically diversifying, I don't know what Sisi thinks about this, but personally, being in academia, one thing I can say is the spaces for critical thinking in Sri Lanka are actually limited because it isn't really the case that we have research ecosystems that support, critical publications, because there is quite a bit of like, in my opinion, there's quite a bit of like a colonial overtone in terms of what a lot of our experts actually publish. Like to share one personal example of what I went through. So last year, I did a research on the concepts of law that was practiced in Sri Lanka in the Kandyan Kingdom before the Kandyan Kingdom was actually colonized. And I had a massive problem in finding a research conference, a journal that I could get my research published in because it was getting rejected on the basis that it was a historical legal analysis as opposed to a contemporary legal analysis. So I had to actually travel to India to present that research, simply because the research ecosystem is more open to critical thinking. And when I wanted to study the relationship between just development and international political economy, the influence of colonialism in the way we define development, etc., I couldn't find a course in Sri Lanka. I had to travel to the UK to access the course. So you do have issues of critical engagement in Sri Lanka, because a lot of the courses theoretically are provided, but whether they allow spaces for publication and critical thinking is a big question.
Yeah, yeah. And those are real issues in higher education, where we talk about research, fully exploring the postgraduate landscape. It's not just about getting the degree, but the quality of the learning experience and what you're able to accomplish. Cicely, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, in terms of practicality and analytical thinking, I think even the state university, like so-called, we are from the Department of Economics, University of Colombo, and we call ourselves the best department for economics. Still, yeah, there is a kind of a bigger proportion of the students are not really analytical thinkers. And I think I was also kind of surprised, because I recently joined the department after a couple of years, but I also see a huge gap between students right now, because they have faced nearly 2 years of online education. So that was a huge impact on students, critical,
Yes.
because they have done everything online, and they were very
Burnt out.
Some students are from very far far away villages, so signal issues, not having proper infrastructure to do the online studies. So those were basic issues with the few batches right now. But in terms of course content, you know what, we offer an academic degree, so we really cannot focus much into practical or the industrial focus. But I also have to say that, as Shira mentioned, we have a good pool of courses in both in even within the state university system. But there is a huge book published by the UGC every year with more than 100 courses in. But my question is whether the students follow it properly, whether they really go through all the courses, because the focus is going for certain professionals, like professional degrees. And mostly what happen is, according to the results, students choose the course. Not mostly, like very rarely students go through the courses and choose a course. So these kind of issues are there, and universities right now facing huge issues with respect to bringing in industrial experts, because with all the budget cuts now, we don't pay much for the visiting lecturers. So many professional degrees face huge issues, because visiting lecturers are not coming in from the industry. So which again makes the employability of the students very less. So yeah, there are a lot of areas to discuss regarding university education. As a whole, the biggest problem right now is the issue with human resources. Lot of professionals leaving the country, and we are lack of the staff. And so even the course contents are good, if there's no good people to teach and show the right way, students won't develop anyways. So yeah, those are the current issues actually within the state universities. So in terms of private education, I think I don't know very much of it, but as we know, like most of the selected areas are chosen by private universities. So most of the degrees are employable degrees. So the problem is basically with the academic degrees. social sciences degrees, which known to be less employable. So the focus should be there with some structural changes with respect to the university admission, whether we have to give this much of seats for social sciences, and do we need to increase the level of IT graduates or whatever the needed people in the industries right now. Yeah, that's
Yeah. All right. So we're getting to the apex of the discussion. Let me see if I can track what we've established so far. 1948, independence. 1956, Sinkhali was declared the national language. I got that right? Good.
Good job. It's Benjamin. You're doing a great job.
1972, independence. There was a period of economic prosperity in 1976. And that's when you switched to an open economy. And at some, I would want to say that maybe I'm skipping several decades here, but sometime in 2019, when some tax restructuring took place that didn't fit the Sri Lankan economy, it caused a downturn, which caused civil unrest coupled with COVID. I'm happy that you brought that perspective in, Thessaly. I think we're forgetting that a lot happened in that time, that it wasn't just so much money, it was people being restricted. You spoke about it as well, Savin. So people, they reached a pressuring point. But despite the interruption, I don't think I like the word failure, though I'm not an economist. I just don't like it. Despite the interruption, things came back in the governance within a reasonable time, a short space of time, and the country is on track to restoring economic and political normalcy. All right? Did I capture that well so far? Now, what is the role of higher education in furthering this process of healing to the nation? I'm joining in speaking poetry with Savin. I think I put that quite nicely. And I'd like to hear from each of you on this question. What is the role of the higher education sector in responding to the challenges faced by Sri Lanka, both politically and economically? I'll start with Savin, then Thessaly, and then Shirak.
Yeah, thank you for giving me a new, a title, poetry. Yeah, so the problem here, once again, in Sri Lanka is we have the British education system, and it's kind of like this. They gave us the education system during 1815 and during that time, and during 19th as well. But they forgot to give us updates. They left us, right? So we are still stuck in the education system that was created to create basically to create employees for the betterment of the British Empire, right? But there's no British Empire. It's all gone, and we are still stuck there. So we didn't reform that. Not in a not in a fruitful manner. We didn't reform that, and each year around 350,000 students sit for the A-level examination, which is the most competitive examination in Sri Lanka and probably one of the most competitive examinations in the entire world. So from there, we take only 30,000 students for free education. We select only 30,000 students for education, for higher education, and that also based on an ESET score. Where, for example, let's say I wanted to follow medicine. I wanted to be a gastrologist or a surgeon or something. But my ESET score wants me to be a dentist or maybe a veterinarian, because I don't have that much of credits to do that certain degree program. So then they step back and they lose their passion in a way. But if you are a Sri Lankan who have enough money to go to a private university, not medicine of course, because currently we don't have any private universities which give the MBBS degree. That's a whole other issue. So people go abroad, people who can go abroad, because it's very 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 expensive to go abroad and study MBBS. Now picture this, Benjamin. You go out of your country, you are not educated, your higher education is not from your country, you are a doctor. Will you come back to Sri Lanka back again? Maybe you followed free education up until you were 19 years old, up until your A-levels, but you did your higher education abroad. Will you come back here or will you stay there? Most probably you will stay there. So we have spent the tax, we have spent the hard-earned money of the citizens of Sri Lanka to create a doctor, a well-qualified doctor, but not for us, not for our country. So it's sort of like we are just sending people who have learned from the money of the government, from the system of from the education system of Sri Lanka, but they work in another country. That's basically brain drain. So that is happening a lot in Sri Lanka. So how do we stop this? And how do we make students who will stay in Sri Lanka and who will contribute to the economy of Sri Lanka? So I talked about this with Chirantiaka at the national TV program also a couple of days ago. So there's this book called The Island by Aldous Huxley. It's a utopian book. It's the book for, you might have heard of Brave New World. It's the dystopian book, but this is the utopian one. So in this book, Aldous Huxley asks the question, what is the purpose of a school? What is the purpose of education? And he replies, the purpose of education is to create a human who is fully realized. So that is the basic essence of education. And then he asked, what does students of America do? What are they made for? They are made for mass consumption. Because due to consumption, the economy of America or the USA grow. Then why are the students of China or maybe Japan or maybe even India are created for? They are created to create, to produce, because that's what their economy is based on. They produce, they send stuff all over the world. That's how they grow as a country. Then they ask, what are the students of Russia made for, or other socialist countries? They are made for to create, to make the power of the state even more powerful. So they are for the state. Those students are made for the state itself. So what does Sri Lanka do? So you might know the American dream. So the Sri Lankan dream currently is to learn freely from Sri Lanka, get your healthcare free from Sri Lanka, then jump out of the country and get paid in millions of dollars and never come back to Sri Lanka and just be there. So that is rather selfish of us. So this should be stopped. And we can't blame people who are migrating as well and who are going to do their professional work in other countries, because we don't have the structures, as we all talked here. We don't have the let's say the organization to do that. So what the government should focus on right now is to leave education alone for a bit. Yes, you can reform the education, true, you can introduce the module 4. In 2024, they'll introduce the module 4, which is like it's there to reduce the competition of the students and also to create the practicality, as we all talked about, to increase the practicality of the students rather than parroting everything out, because Sri Lanka takes great pride in parroting everything out, Sri Lankan students. So sure, that should be that's a necessity. That's not a reform. That should be done. That should have been done 150 years ago. But okay, we are glad it's happening now. But you should then create organizations, even government organizations and private organizations, which use these students' capability to the fullest, and then produce some economic growth in Sri Lanka itself, rather than personal gain, rather than government revenues to spend on uh, rectifying the loans alone. So that should be done first, and then the current education system, in my point of view, sure, it's parroting out. It's not fit for the modern economy. But as we talked earlier, Sri Lankan people are very intelligent, and they can work at any place in the entire world. There are Sri Lankans who are in NASA. There are people who are, top surgeons in the world, and people sometimes come here to uh, do their operations here because the MBBS degree in Sri Lanka is respected that much. So that is there. So I think reform in higher education should be there, but we should also reform the entirety of the government organizations and also the private organizations as well, to a certain extent. So I think what they are trying to do, they gave the budget in the parliament few days back, and in that there are a lot of changes that they wanted to do for education, specifically higher education. They wanted to create to give universities status for few private universities to attract foreign students here, so they can get foreign revenue, and also keep some of the students who are going abroad for studies here in Sri Lanka itself as well. So that's very good. That's very good. But we should make them stay. The government should maybe give certain bonuses, certain passes for students who study in free education, who studies in Sri Lanka, not only free education itself. Students who study in Sri Lanka, the opportunity to experience the practical side of the fields that they study, because as Tisali mentioned, the practicality of the students are at a very, very, very low point in Sri Lanka. That's why when they go into a uh, when they go into the job market, in today's job market, it's not only Sri Lanka, it's just the entire worldwide job market is there, because we are working, we are competing with the entire world because of the global village. So I think that should be made. Then trust Sri Lankan students. Trust them to be good managers, to be good doctors, to be, because they have the skill set. Trust them. And I would ask this of the citizens as well. Try to trust students, because they are the future, because they are the people who will give you medicine one day, who will create your houses one day, who will be there when you need them. Yeah. So I think that is a sociological perhaps view on higher education, and yeah, that should be done. There are, sure, my main point, to key point that I would like the audience to take away is give each other a hand and trust people, and also try to give the practical knowledge, because no matter how we reform the education system, even in the best education system in the world, Finland, even their education system have certain loopholes, because we education is done in a controlled uh, state, but when you go out to the society, it's very different. So that would be great if the ministers take this into their mind. And also I heard a very I was actually disheartened by this comment in the parliament yesterday. So the minister of education was higher education was telling all the amends that he wants to do all the things that he wants to change on education. Then one minister stood up, I can't remember her name. She told, sure, these are very good reforms, this is very good, and I think this will be perfect for the current economic system of the country, but this government cannot do this. That was her comment. Now, governments, people, they have their differences, and politics, democracy, 50-50, no problem. You can, it's free speech. You have all the freedom to express yourself, but just think, education should not be politicized, and education should not be you can't do that. Our government can, but your government
Right,
can't.
right, right.
That's wrong. Every
Thank you.
government should do that. So yeah.
Yes, yes. All right, so we are going to move to close shortly. I would like to invite each of you in 3 minutes each to tell us if you're a Minister of Education or Minister of Higher Education, suggest 1 or 2 policy directives that you would pursue in higher education in response to the challenges discussed. Shira, Honorable Minister, you're in office for 4 years. What are you doing?
I mean, it is indeed a dangerous position to hold. I must say that at the start, if I am elected to that position. But in any case, 2 points of like priority and policy that I think I would execute is setting up around 6 to 7 priority research clusters in Sri Lanka, particularly based on what Sri Lanka has the capacity to specialize in, and then organizing the state as well as non-state universities under those research clusters so that there is private and public cooperation. I think that is lacking in Sri Lanka because the private sector or the non-state sector has its own association called SLANTRI, and they organize their own research conferences, they have their own sort of networking events, versus the state structure has its own sort of consortium. So it's essential to link the two together simply because of the possibility for resource sharing, the possibility for shared expertise, as well as the need to sort of understand that higher education as a system can only improve if we bridge this very arbitrary state versus non-state sort of barrier. And the second policy point and contribution I wanted to make is the importance of actually using blended learning at a university level. I mean, we've discussed this extensively in Sri Lanka about using blended learning at a school level, but at university level, where we have adults who are actually tech savvy, who are interested in engaging with technological learning means. Unfortunately, Sri Lankan universities do not sufficiently use blended learning. I mean, our blended learning is only restricted to having smart boards and having like a learning management system, which we, rarely update. So I think it's important that we go beyond that to have a more efficient blended learning system, especially things like massive open classrooms, free online courses, online discussion communities that can be organized, which we don't effectively do in the higher education system in Sri Lanka. So those would be my 2 policy interventions.
Yes, thank you. And about these 6 research clusters, is it that there are 6 different thematic research clusters? Do you have in mind the thematic areas?
I mean, not all 6 off the top of my head, but I think, for example, if I was to share 2 examples, I think one thing that Sri Lanka actually can contribute globally in terms of, positively contributing to the marketplace of ideas is Sri Lanka's own endemic knowledge systems like Ayurveda. We also have Sri Lanka's own own sort of like critical development concepts in terms of sustainable development thinking. So I would say we can capitalize on what we can add, which the world isn't already a specialized entity in. So those
Thank
would be
you.
the two
Thank you.
examples. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Or economist turned Minister of Education.
So I really don't have that much of precise ideas for that.
That's
but,
all right. I think Shira wants the
uh,
job.
I agree with Shira, like some considerable amount of spending is needed in terms of research and development in higher education, definitely. And also regarding the skills gap between the graduates and what is the labor market need, it should be addressed with, like, there is a huge graduate unemployment in Sri Lanka. And this problem was there since a long time, and this is also because of the in for a certain level, it is because of some perspectives of the people and graduates themselves, but they look for a specific job, and they some graduates wait for a government job. And also about jobs, the issue is that very much entrepreneurship is discouraged in Sri Lanka. They don't really like going for a government job, being a doctor, being a teacher, or being an engineer, working for a company is risk free. So it is more encouraged than doing something on their own. So this entrepreneurship skills and encouraging for business startups is not really addressing right now in university degrees. I mean, we only have 1 or 2 degrees for entrepreneurship, which is the least demanded even in the management faculties. So this is something like if the government can intervene and give some more incentives towards this kind of graduates to start up businesses or something, some economic boost can be done at least for several years. Yeah, those are the two ideas pop up into my mind. Yeah.
Thank you. So my work time starts on the hour, which means I'll have to get out of my manager's office and go to my desk. So Savin, I want you to tell us one priority, and then I'd like to invite each of you to render your closing remarks in 1 minute so I can go and keep my job.
Yeah, we will put you out of a job talking about education and all in Sri Lanka. Yeah, so yeah, I think if I pick one, it would be focusing on teachers. Focusing on Sri Lankan teachers is very important to uplift the education system, and if you want to correctly practice all the reforms that the government want to do, because you should increase their salary. They live in a very poor states, the teachers. Due to that, they do tuition, which is private tutoring, and this is very much discouraged in the society nowadays as well. But how can the teachers live if they don't have an extra income, and that income comes from private tutoring? So in a way, free education now has been transformed into a not so free education. So that would be that would be solved completely if the salary issue is solved by in the students of the teachers. And also teach the teachers how to teach, not the subject, because teachers know about their subject a lot. That's why they become teachers, that's why they are the top of their class, even lecturers. But teach them how to teach, and teach them how to teach in a holistic manner. Holistic education system is the best education system that one can uh, have in the entire world. And also pragmatism, because I'm in the education field. I know there's a concept called pragmatism by John Dewey's. If you're interested, Google it and see. So use those concepts, use those principles when teaching, and teach them to future teachers and also current teachers as well. And from their own, subject always comes, but the teaching methods, you have to teach them.
Thank you, Savin. Who is going to go first in rendering your closing remarks in your local tongue? You could just tell us what that language is and share with us. and perhaps summarize what you said afterwards so I can know what you said. Cheryl, you look ready to go.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, it's not because like I want to like leave or anything, but I'm very conscious of the fact that we've kept you for close to 1.5 hours. So
That's
you
a
want
normal time. That's good. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Benjamin, do you want us to like share our thoughts in Sinhalese, like as in our mother tongue? Did you mention that or in English?
Yes, no,
Oh,
in your local tongue, but then just a brief translation summary afterwards. Yeah.
sure. So I was speaking Sinhalese. I think all three of us might actually, because our Tamil knowledge is a little bit limited. I mean, personally, mine is. I'm not sure of Thesis and Savin's. But let me start by making my final remarks. මම ඇත්තටම මේ සාකච්ඡාවේ අන්තිමටම කියන්න කැමති කාරණාව තමයි ලංකාව ගොඩක් වෙලාවට එක්ස්පෝර්ට් කරන නැත්නම් අපනයනය කරන එක සාධකයක් තමයි ඇත්තටම අධ්‍යාපනයේ තියෙන පුද්ගලයන්. මොකද ලංකාවේ ගොඩක් ඉගෙන ගන්න කට්ටිය එළියට යනවා වෙන රටවල් වල වෙන අංශවල ගෝලීය අංශවල වැඩ කරන්න. ඉතින් මම හිතන්නේ මේකට හොඳම විසඳුම තමයි අපි විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ඔය ඩිග්‍රී ලබා දෙන ආයතන නැත්නම් එක්කෝ courses ලබා දෙන ආයතන විදිහට විතරක් සීමා කළ දකින්න නැතුව අපි ඇත්තටම විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයක් කියලා කියන්නේ රටක පරිපාලනයට රටක ප්‍රතිපත්ති සම්පාදන ක්‍රියාපිළිවෙත් වලට ඒ වගේ විවිධ ක්‍රියාපිළිවෙත් වලට ඇත්තටම වටිනාකමක් දෙන්න පුළුවන් ආයතනයක් ඒකේ තියෙන බල බෙදීමට මේ බල බෙදීමට check and balance එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් ආයතනයක් කියලා ආයතන කියලා අපි ඇත්තටම ඒ ගැන හිතන්න ඕනේ. ඒ දේ තමයි මට අන්තිමටම එකතු කරන්න තියෙන්නේ. So what I said, Benjamin, was that if you take a look at Sri Lanka, one of Sri Lanka's biggest exports is educated people. We keep exporting educated people who work in other countries. And one key reason for that is because we look at universities as just these degree awarding institutions. So we need to look at them as like checks and balances and value-adding institutions to the overall governance of Sri Lanka. So that was my final sort of point.
Thank you. Cicely?
So I'm supposed to talk in Sinhalese, right?
Please.
Higher education එකේම නැත්නම් උසස් අධ්‍යාපනය ගැන ගත්තහම එක පොඩි පොයින්ට් එකක් කියන්නම් අපි අපේ එක්ස්පෝර්ට්ස් තියෙන්නේ ගොඩක්ම තාම තියෙන්නේ බොහොම ප්‍රාථමික මට්ටමේ අපි කියන්නේ තේ පොල් රබර් යවනවා ඊට පස්සේ ඔය ඇංගලුම් කර්මාන්තය කියලා පොඩ්ඩක් තියෙනවා ඒවා low value added ලොකු ඉන්කම් එකක් නැහැ. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා ඇත්තටම චිරා කිව්වා වගේ ඉගෙන ගත්ත මිනිස්සු රට යවන එක එක්ස්පෝර්ට් කරන එක ඔයිට වැඩිය පොඩ්ඩක් රටට හොඳ විදිහට කරන්න බැරි කමක් නෑ හරියට යුනිවර්සිටිස් ෆන්ක්ෂන් වෙනවන. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට මේක අර බුද්ධි ගලනයක් කියන්නේ නැතුව අපිට පුළුවන් අපේ සර්විස් එක එක්ස්පෝර්ට් කරන්න. අපි මෙහි දැන් අර ගොඩක්ම කොවිඩ් වලින් පස්සේ ඔන්ලයින් වර්කින් අනම්මනම් තියෙනවා. ඉතින් කන්සල්ටන්සි කරන්න පුළුවන් අපේ එඩියුකේෂන් එක එහෙම නැත්නම් හෙල්ත් සර්විස් එක අපිට පිටරටට එක්ස්පෝර්ට් කරන්න පුළුවන්. දැනටමත් එහෙම වෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒකට රජේනුත් උදව්වක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒ වගේම higher education එක ඇතුලෙන් ඒකට incentive එකක් එනවා නම් හොඳයි කියලා මම හිතනවා. So a brief translation. So the point I made was if we can make if we can make the brain drain more into a positive thing through universities or and also by getting the support from the government, if we can export our services rather than sending all our educated professionals out of the country, if we can bring or outsource bringing services inside, we can serve other countries and earn dollars within by living within the country, and also we can export our education or as healthcare because we have high standard in these areas rather than developing industrial goods. So some inputs into that would be better in terms of developing our economy, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm not going to say I saved the best for last, but I surely do have some favor towards Savin because of all his help to us in bringing us together. He has been my guy. So ladies, please, we're giving him the last word. Go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. You might find Sinhala language to be very fast, ne? මෙහෙමයි මං හිතන්න ලංකාවේ හැම මිනිසෙක්ම මේකට රජයෙන් ගොඩක් අපිට උදව් කරනවා නම් හොඳයි උනට හැම මිනිස්සුම කරන්න වෙන දෙයක් තමයි කරන්න ඕන දෙයක් නෙමෙයි වෙන දෙයක් තමයි ව්‍යවසායකත්වය කියන්නේ entrepreneurship. ඇත්තටම දැන්ටමත් ඒක වෙනවා කට්ටිය රස්සා කරන ගමන් තව මොන හරි සයිඩ් හසල් එකක් කරනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ මොන හරි පැත්තෙන් කරනවා කීයක් හරි අතර ගානක් ගන්න. ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් බලන්න දියුණු කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා. ඔයා ඒක රිප්ලේස් කරන්න බලන්න. ඔයාගේ ජොබ් එක රිප්ලේස් කරන්න බලන්න ඒකෙන්. ඒක එහෙම තමයි ලෝකේ හැදුණු ව්‍යවසායකයෝ හැදුනේ. එයාලා මේ එකපාරටම ව්‍යවසායකත්වය කියලා බිල්ඩින් හදාගෙන කරන්න ගියේ නෑ. ඒ වගේ කරන්න එනවා මං කියන්නේ රජයට දෙන්න පුළුවන් නම් අඩුම ගානේ අවුරුදු 2කවත් ටැක්ස් බ්‍රේක් එකක් ව්‍යවසායකත්වයට. අවුරුදු 2ක් පොඩ්ඩක් රිස්ක් එකක් ගන්න දෙන්න. පොඩි සේෆ්ටි නෙට් එකක් වගේ දාන්න පුළුවන් නම් පල්ලෙහායින් පොලිසිස් වලින් විශේෂයෙන්ම entrepreneurship වලට අපිට හොඳ ගමනක් තියෙනවා. මොකද දැනටමත් ශිෂ්‍ය වශයෙන් ස්ටුඩන්ට්ස්ලා මාර විදියට අර ඉසලි අක්ක කිව්වා වගේ වැඩ කරනවා රිමෝට්. මොකද බෝඩින් සල්ලි ගෙවන්න බෑ නැත්තම්. ප්‍රයිවට් උනත් ගවර්න්මන්ට් උනත් ජීවත් වෙන්න බෑ. කොළඹ විශේෂයෙන්ම කොළඹ විශ්වවිද්‍යාල වලට එන අයට කොහොමද ජීවත් වෙන්න අමාරුයි. එතකොට එහෙම වෙනවා නම් ඒක හොඳයි. ඒත් එක්කම මම මතක් කරන්න කැමති රජයේ මගේ සහෝදර සිසුන්ට අන්තරේට හරි මොහොකට හරි වේවා. අපි එකම පන්ති අර සින්දුව කියනවා වගේ. ඒක නිසා අපිට පුළුවන් නම් කම්බයින්ඩ්ලා ප්‍රයිවට් ස්ටුඩන්ට්ස්ලාත් එක්ක මොනවා හරි ගේමක් ගහන්න බැරි කමන්නේ. මේ දේශපාලනේ පැත්තකින් තියලා දේශපාලනේ කරන අයට කරගන්න දීලා කරන්න අකමැති අයට මම දන්නවා ඕක ඇතුලේ ඕන තරම් ඉන්නවා අර පියර් ප්‍රෙෂර් එහෙම නැත්නම් යාළුවෝ කරන නිසා කරන අය. පොඩ්ඩක් එළියට බහැලා අපි එහෙම පොඩි මොකක් හරි කොලැබොරේෂන් එකක් කරන්න අපි ඉස්සරහට පොඩි අදහසක් තියෙනවා බලමු එහෙම හදාගන්න පුළුවන් වුණොත් ඇත්තටම මුළු ලංකාවට මේක වටිනාකමක් වෙයි. Yeah, so Benjamin, what I told was to inculcate entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka more, and also for the government of Sri Lanka to give more, like tax breaks and give a safety net basically for the entrepreneurs who are trying to build their brands, build their businesses. Because right now a lot of Sri Lankans do side hustles, because in this current economy you cannot just live off your job salary. They do a lot of side hustles, and if you give the right support backing to the right people, you can create great multi-billionaires, billionaires, and people who will then go on to give job opportunities for other Sri Lankans. So that should be encouraged. And also I talked about creating an alliance between the government university students and also the private university students, because right now we have been actually shifted apart by the politics of Sri Lanka. So if we were a common if we have a common collaborative organization, we will be unstoppable and we will be able to take our economy to a next level, because students, as I said, are the future of Sri Lanka and future of the world. Yeah, thank you.
And as fate would have it, my laptop is at 2% and my charger is not here. I think this was a beautiful session and the perfect way to end our talk. Thank you so much for joining our CSA Fireside. We'll continue to learn from each other, sharing diverse experiences and perspectives. Until the next time, take care.